1 week ago today, Charlie Kirk collapsed on live television, and Jonathan Roumie rushed to his side. What I'm about to share with you is the incredible story of everything that followed, a journey that began with a medical emergency but became something far more extraordinary than anyone could have imagined. 1 week ago, during a live Fox News broadcast watched by millions, something happened that no one saw coming. Charlie Kirk, the 31-year-old founder of Turning Point USA, was in the middle of delivering his signature passionate commentary when suddenly his words began to slur. The cameras kept rolling as America's most recognizable young conservative voice stumbled mid-sentence, his face turning pale as he gripped the edge of the desk. What happened next would change everything we thought we knew about faith, friendship, and the hidden struggles of public figures. But here's what the cameras didn't show you, and what Fox News initially chose not to air. In that terrifying moment when Kirk's legs gave out and he collapsed forward, there was someone else in that studio. Someone whose presence there that day wasn't planned, wasn't scheduled, and whose lightning-fast response would reveal a connection between these two men that goes far deeper than anyone imagined. Jonathan Roumie, the actor who portrays Jesus in The Chosen, didn't hesitate for even a second. He leaped over a camera cable, pushed past two security guards, and reached Kirk before anyone else could react. The question everyone's asking now isn't just what caused a healthy 31-year-old to suddenly collapse on live television. The question that's been haunting social media for the past week is this: how did Jonathan Roumie know exactly what to do in that moment? How did he know to check Kirk's pulse in that specific way? How did he know to position Kirk's head at that precise angle? And why, when Kirk's eyes fluttered open 3 minutes later, did he look directly at Roumie and whisper 4 words that the boom microphone picked up, words that have left viewers around the world demanding answers? Because what Kirk whispered in that vulnerable moment, words that Fox News executives are still deciding whether to release, would explain everything that's happened since. Those 4 words would reveal why Kirk has canceled every speaking engagement for the next month, why he stepped back from his daily podcast, and why sources close to both men say this incident has sparked a friendship that's already changing how both approach their public platforms. The collapse lasted less than 5 minutes, but what followed in the green room afterward, the conversation between these two men from completely different worlds, has reportedly left everyone who witnessed it describing it as the most profound discussion they've ever heard about faith, purpose, and what it really means to serve others. And here's the part that will shock you most. This wasn't the first time Jonathan Roumie had saved someone's life. The studio cameras captured the collapse, but they missed the moment that's really driving this story. They missed the split second when Roumie's expression changed from concern to something else entirely. Something that suggests he recognized what was happening to Kirk, not just medically, but spiritually. And if the sources we've spoken to are correct, what Roumie whispered back to Kirk in that moment explains everything that's unfolded since, including why Kirk's team has received over 50,000 messages in the past week from people sharing their own stories of unexpected moments that changed their lives forever. This isn't just a story about a medical emergency on live television. This is a story about two men whose lives intersected at exactly the moment when one needed the other most, and how that intersection is now inspiring thousands of people to reconsider what really matters in their own lives. But to understand why this moment was so powerful, and why it's still sending shockwaves through both political and religious communities, we need to go back to that studio, to those crucial 5 minutes when the cameras were rolling but the real story was happening in the spaces between heartbeats. It was 3:47 p.m. Eastern Time when Charlie Kirk's world literally turned upside down. Mid-sentence during his Fox News segment about college campus politics, Kirk suddenly paused. For seconds of dead silence. Then his face went ashen and he collapsed forward. Here's what makes this extraordinary: Jonathan Roumie wasn't supposed to be there. He had finished his interview 2 hours earlier and should have left the building by 2:30 p.m. Yet there he was in the green room, still wearing his guest microphone. The reason he stayed? Sources say he had a feeling he couldn't shake, a prompting that he needed to remain in the building. When Kirk hit the floor, Roumie was already moving. But his response defied explanation. He didn't check Kirk's pulse where most people would. Instead, he placed his fingers in a specific location that medical professionals later confirmed was optimal for detecting weak heartbeats. His hand positioning ensured Kirk's airway stayed clear. These weren't basic first aid moves. These were the actions of someone with advanced medical training. Then Roumie did something that stunned everyone present. While unconscious, Kirk began responding to words Roumie was whispering, words so quiet only the boom microphone caught them. The 20-year veteran boom operator later told colleagues he'd never seen anything like Kirk's physical response to whatever Roumie was saying. At 3:51 p.m., exactly 4 minutes later, Kirk's eyes opened. Instead of confusion, he looked directly at Roumie with profound recognition and whispered 4 words, "You were sent here." Roumie simply nodded and whispered something back that only Kirk could hear. Whatever it was caused Kirk to close his eyes in what appeared to be deep peace. But here's the detail that has security analysts puzzled. The footage shows Roumie praying over Kirk, but his lips were moving in a pattern that lip-reading experts can't decipher. It wasn't English, Spanish, or any recognizable language. Yet whatever he was saying created an immediate calm that spread through the entire chaotic studio. Kirk refused hospital transport, insisting on a private 20-minute conversation with Roumie first. Studio executives watching through soundproof glass described it as the most intense discussion they'd ever witnessed. When they emerged, both men appeared completely transformed. The real mystery? According to witnesses, this wasn't a chance encounter. This was the continuation of something that began weeks earlier, something that would explain why Roumie felt compelled to stay, why his response was so precise, and why Kirk's first words suggested he'd been expecting this moment all along. What we're about to reveal will shock you. 3 weeks before that collapse, Charlie Kirk had been experiencing something he'd never talked about publicly, episodes of crushing chest pain that left him gasping for air in the middle of speaking events. His team attributed it to stress, but Kirk knew something deeper was wrong. He'd been pushing himself relentlessly, sleeping 3 hours a night, living on energy drinks and adrenaline. But here's the part that changes everything. Kirk had been having the same recurring dream for 2 weeks straight. In it, he was falling, unable to breathe, when someone with kind eyes reached out to help him. Every night, the same dream. Every morning, he woke up wondering who that person was and why the dream felt more like a warning than random imagination. The night before the Fox News appearance, Kirk's chest pains were so severe he almost canceled. His assistant found him at 2 a.m. in his hotel room, clutching his chest and struggling to breathe. When she suggested calling 911, Kirk refused. Instead, he said something that would prove prophetic. If something happens tomorrow, it's supposed to happen. Someone will be there who needs to be there. Meanwhile, Jonathan Roumie had his own mysterious experience that morning. He'd woken up with an overwhelming urge to pray for someone he didn't know, someone in media who was struggling with more than the public realized. During his own Fox News interview about The Chosen, Roumie felt compelled to ask if he could stay in the building longer. When asked why, he simply said he had a feeling someone might need him. But here's where this story takes an incredible turn. Roumie's background isn't just acting. Before his career took off, he'd spent 2 years as a volunteer EMT in Los Angeles, responding to emergency calls in some of the city's most challenging neighborhoods. He'd saved lives before, but always told friends he felt called to help people during their most vulnerable moments. His EMT certification had expired, but the training was embedded in his muscle memory. That explains his precise medical response, but it doesn't explain what happened next. Because when Kirk whispered, "You were sent here," Roumie recognized something in Kirk's eyes that went beyond physical emergency. He later told close friends it was the same look he'd seen in his recurring dreams for the past month. Dreams where he was helping someone whose public strength masked private desperation. During their 20-minute private conversation, sources say Kirk broke down completely. He admitted to Roumie that he'd been questioning everything, his purpose, his platform, whether the constant battle was destroying him from the inside. He confessed that the chest pains weren't just physical, they were his body's response to carrying burdens he was never meant to carry alone. Roumie's response stunned Kirk. He shared that for weeks, He'd been praying for someone in conservative media who was struggling with the weight of public expectations. He'd felt called to be available, to be present, without knowing why or for whom. When he saw Kirk collapse, Roumie knew instantly this was the person he'd been praying for. But the most shocking revelation came when Roumie admitted something he'd never told anyone. The prayer he'd whispered over unconscious Kirk wasn't in an unknown language. It was in Aramaic, the language Jesus spoke. Roumie had learned it for his role in The Chosen, but he'd never used it in prayer before that moment. The words came to him instinctively, a prayer for healing that seemed to flow through him rather than from him. Kirk later said that even while unconscious, he could hear every word of that prayer, and though he didn't understand the language, he felt peace flooding through him for the first time in months. When he whispered back to Roumie upon waking, it wasn't just gratitude, it was recognition that this moment had been orchestrated by something far bigger than coincidence. The evidence was undeniable. Two men from different worlds, both experiencing supernatural promptings that led them to the exact place and time where one would need the other most. Kirk's dreams of falling and being caught. Roumie's compulsion to pray for an unknown person in media. His decision to stay in the building despite having no reason to. Kirk's prophetic words about someone being there who needed to be there. What happened next would prove this wasn't just a medical emergency. It was a divine appointment that would change both their lives and impact thousands of others in ways no one could have predicted. What happened in the hours immediately following Kirk's collapse would send shockwaves through both men's teams and reveal just how profound their encounter had been. Within 30 minutes of leaving the Fox News studio, Kirk made a decision that stunned everyone around him. He canceled his next 3 speaking engagements, worth over $200,000 in fees, with a single phone call. His assistant later revealed that Kirk's exact words were, "I've been speaking about things I haven't been living." That changes today. When pressed for details, Kirk simply said he needed time to align his public message with his private reality. For someone who built his career on never backing down, never showing weakness, this was unprecedented. But Roumie's response was equally surprising. Instead of returning to Los Angeles as scheduled, he extended his East Coast stay indefinitely. He told his management team he felt called to be available for follow-up conversations with Kirk. When they reminded him of his filming schedule, Roumie said something that left everyone speechless. "Some things are more important than career momentum. This is one of them." The first sign that something extraordinary was unfolding came that evening. Kirk, who typically posted 15 to 20 times daily across all social platforms, went completely silent. His social media team panicked, assuming he was still recovering from the medical episode. But sources close to Kirk reveal he was actually in a marathon phone conversation with Roumie that lasted until 3 a.m. During that call, Kirk admitted something that would explain his radical response to the collapse. He confessed that for months, he'd been feeling like a fraud. Standing on stages talking about faith and purpose while privately battling panic attacks and existential doubt. The chest pains weren't just stress, they were his body rebelling against the disconnect between his public persona and private struggles. Roumie's counsel during that late-night conversation was simple but transformative. He told Kirk that authenticity wasn't weakness, it was the foundation of genuine influence. He shared how his own journey playing Jesus had forced him to confront the gap between the character he portrayed and the man he actually was. The growth happened not in pretending to be perfect, but in honestly pursuing transformation. By morning, both men had made decisions that would reshape their immediate futures. Kirk announced he was taking a month-long sabbatical from all public appearances to focus on his health, physical, mental, and spiritual. His team was horrified. A month away from the spotlight could derail his momentum permanently. Kirk's response shocked them. "What good is momentum if it's driving me toward a cliff?" Roumie made an equally surprising announcement. He was postponing his return to The Chosen, filming to co-host a series of intimate conversations with Kirk about authentic leadership and the cost of public platforms. These wouldn't be typical interviews or political discussions, but vulnerable explorations of what it means to lead with integrity when the pressure to perform is overwhelming. The announcement sent both men's followers into confusion. Conservative audiences wondered if Kirk was having a breakdown. Faith-based audiences questioned whether Roumie was getting too political. But something unexpected happened. Messages began pouring in from people who resonated deeply with their honesty about struggle and transformation. Within 48 hours, they received over 10,000 messages from people sharing their own stories of burnout, authenticity struggles, and the pressure to maintain perfect public images. Pastors admitted to preaching sermons they didn't personally believe. Business leaders confessed to promoting values they weren't living. College students opened up about the exhaustion of maintaining social media personas that didn't match their reality. The response revealed something profound. Kirk's collapse hadn't just been a personal crisis, it had given voice to a hidden epidemic of authenticity fatigue that was affecting people across all walks of life. His willingness to admit vulnerability had created permission for others to acknowledge their own struggles. But the most telling sign that this was more than a temporary response to trauma came in Kirk's first public statement since the collapse. Instead of downplaying the incident or focusing on his recovery, he wrote something that stunned both critics and supporters. Sometimes God uses our breakdowns to create our breakthroughs. I'm grateful for every part of what happened, including the collapse, because it introduced me to a friend and a perspective I desperately needed. The stage was set for something unprecedented, two public figures choosing transparency over image management, depth over surface performance, and authentic connection over political positioning. What they would create together would challenge everything both conservative and progressive audiences expected from public discourse, and inspire a movement toward honesty that neither man saw coming. 5 days after the collapse, something unexpected happened that no one saw coming. A video surfaced that would change everything. Security footage from the Fox News lobby showed Roumie in the moments before Kirk's broadcast, and what it revealed left viewers stunned. He was pacing back and forth, clearly agitated, checking his phone repeatedly, and at one point, he stopped and appeared to be praying intensely with his hands pressed against the wall. The timestamp showed this was happening exactly 30 minutes before Kirk collapsed. Roumie wasn't casually lingering in the building. He was battling some internal urgency that he couldn't ignore. When asked about the footage, Roumie admitted something that sent chills through everyone who heard it. I knew something was about to happen. I didn't know what or to whom, but I could feel it building. But the real breakthrough came when their first joint conversation was accidentally live-streamed. Kirk's team had set up what they thought was a private video call for planning purposes, but a technical glitch broadcast the entire 45-minute discussion to Kirk's YouTube channel. By the time they realized what had happened, over 100,000 people were watching in real time. Instead of cutting the feed, Kirk made a spontaneous decision that would define everything that followed. He looked directly into the camera and said, "If you're watching this, maybe you're supposed to be. We weren't planning to share this conversation, but perhaps transparency shouldn't be planned, it should just be lived." What viewers witnessed was unlike anything either man had ever shared publicly. Kirk broke down describing the night terrors that had been plaguing him for months, dreams where he was drowning in a sea of expectations, unable to find solid ground. Roumie shared his own struggles with the pressure of portraying Jesus, admitting there were days he felt completely unworthy of representing such a sacred figure. The vulnerability was raw and unfiltered. Kirk confessed that he'd been taking medication for anxiety attacks but hiding it from his audience because he feared it would undermine his message of strength and faith. Roumie revealed that he'd considered quitting The Chosen multiple times because the spiritual weight of the role was overwhelming his personal faith journey. But then something extraordinary happened during the live stream. Viewers began flooding the comments not with criticism or judgment, but with their own stories of hidden struggles. A pastor from Texas typed, "I've been preaching hope while battling depression for 3 years. Thank you for showing me I'm not alone." A successful businesswoman shared, "I built a company promoting work-life balance while destroying my own family. This is the permission I needed to make changes." The response was so overwhelming that the live stream, which was supposed to last 45 minutes, extended to 3 hours as Kirk and Roumie read and responded to hundreds of personal testimonies flooding the chat. They watched in real time as their vulnerability created a safe space for others to shed their masks and share their authentic struggles. Within 24 hours, the accidental live stream had been viewed over 2 million times. But more importantly, it had sparked what social media analysts were calling the authenticity avalanche. Other public figures began sharing their own hidden struggles. A prominent news anchor revealed her battle with imposter syndrome. A best-selling author admitted to writing books about confidence while struggling with severe self-doubt. The movement gained momentum when something unprecedented happened. Kirk's political opponents began reaching out with messages of support and shared experience. A liberal commentator who had regularly criticized Kirk publicly sent a private message. "We disagree on policy, but I recognize the courage it takes to admit you're struggling. I've been there too." Even more surprising was the response from Kirk's traditional conservative base. Instead of the backlash his team feared, 80% of the feedback was supportive. Longtime followers expressed relief that someone they looked up to was admitting to being human. Many shared that Kirk's vulnerability had actually strengthened their respect for him, not diminished it. The turning point came when Kirk received a call that left him speechless. It was from a prominent evangelical leader who had initially criticized his weakness. The leader apologized, admitting that Kirk's honesty had convicted him about his own performance-based ministry. He asked if Kirk and Roumie would consider bringing their authentic conversation format to his upcoming leadership conference. By the end of the week, they had received over 50 similar invitations. Universities, churches, corporate conferences, and even political organizations were requesting appearances where Kirk and Roumie would simply have honest conversations about leadership, faith, and authenticity. The demand wasn't for polished presentations or carefully crafted messages, it was for real dialogue between real people wrestling with real challenges. The accidental livestream had revealed something profound. There was a hunger for authenticity that crossed all political, religious, and cultural boundaries. People were exhausted by perfect personas and craved genuine connection with leaders who were willing to be human. What started as a medical emergency had accidentally uncovered a movement that no one knew was waiting to emerge. 2 weeks after the collapse, Kirk and Roumie shocked everyone with an announcement: a 30-city authenticity tour, with no agenda, no product to sell, just spaces for people to drop their masks and be real. Nashville, their first stop, sold out in 12 minutes. But there was no stage, no podium, no prepared remarks. Just chairs in a circle and an invitation to radical honesty. Kirk opened by admitting he didn't have answers to life's biggest questions. Roumie confessed that playing Jesus had made him question his faith more than strengthen it. Then the floodgates opened. A businessman admitted to embezzling from his own company to maintain fake success. A Christian blogger confessed her perfect marriage posts were lies while her husband battled depression. A college student revealed years of hiding his sexuality from his conservative family. Each confession created safety for the next. The most powerful moment came when a woman approached the microphone in tears. "I've been angry at you for years because your confidence made me feel like a failure for having doubts. But watching you admit your struggles has given me permission to stop pretending. Thank you for showing me that struggling doesn't make me weak, it makes me human." By evening's end, something unprecedented happened. Political enemies found common ground in shared vulnerability. Religious believers and skeptics connected over universal human experiences. Public discourse divisions dissolved in the face of authentic connection. City after city, the pattern repeated. A pastor in Phoenix admitted alcoholism while preaching self-control. A Chicago attorney confessed workaholic tendencies had destroyed her relationships. A Dallas influencer revealed depression behind her perfect social media posts. The consistency shocked them. Regardless of geography or politics, people carried identical burdens: exhaustion from false personas, loneliness from performance-based success, and desperate longing to be known and accepted for who they really were. But here's what stunned everyone. Kirk's chest pains completely disappeared after he began living authentically. His sleep improved, anxiety decreased, relationships deepened. The physical symptoms that caused his collapse were directly connected to his spiritual and emotional disconnect. The tour sparked cultural transformation beyond the attendees. Mental health professionals saw therapy increases, not breakdowns, but people finally ready to address avoided issues. Corporations implemented authenticity policies. Churches created struggling believers groups. Universities started imperfection circles. What began with a medical emergency had evolved into a movement healing people they'd never met in ways they never anticipated. But the most profound change was still coming, and it would happen where their journey began, a television studio where honesty would once again transform everything. Exactly 1 month after his collapse, Charlie Kirk received a call that would complete the most extraordinary transformation in modern media. Fox News wanted him back, not just as a guest, but to host a primetime special with Jonathan Roumie called When Public Figures Fall, a conversation about authenticity in America. The very studio where Kirk had collapsed would become the stage for something unprecedented. But as Kirk and Roumie prepared to return to that fateful location, something remarkable was happening behind the scenes. The boom operator who had captured Kirk's first whispered words after the collapse approached the producers with a request that would change everything. He wanted to share the audio he'd been keeping private, the words Roumie had spoken over unconscious Kirk, and Kirk's response. When the producers heard the recording, they were stunned into silence. Roumie's Aramaic prayer, when translated, contained a specific phrase, "May your breaking become your breakthrough, and your weakness become your greatest strength." Kirk's whispered response upon awakening wasn't just, "You were sent here." The full quote was, "You were sent here to show me who I'm supposed to become." The night of the special, something extraordinary happened before they even went on air. Studio staff began sharing their own stories with Kirk and Roumie during rehearsal. The same makeup artist who had watched Kirk collapse admitted she'd been struggling with addiction for months, hiding it from everyone. The cameraman revealed he'd been battling thoughts of suicide, feeling like his life had no purpose beyond pointing lenses at other people's success. By airtime, what was supposed to be a controlled interview had transformed into something raw and unrehearsable. Kirk began the broadcast by doing something no primetime host had ever done. He apologized to his audience. Not for being weak, but for pretending to be stronger than he was. "I built a platform on certainty," he said, "but I'm learning that admitting uncertainty might be the most certain truth I can offer." Roumie's contribution was equally powerful. He revealed that since Kirk's collapse, he'd received over 30,000 messages from people sharing their own moments of breaking down and breaking through. "What we discovered," he said, "is that Charlie's collapse wasn't just one man's medical emergency, it was a symbol of what's happening to all of us when we carry more than we're meant to carry alone." The most stunning moment came when they played the original audio from Kirk's collapse for the first time publicly. As viewers heard Roumie's Aramaic prayer and Kirk's prophetic response, something unprecedented happened. Phone lines at Fox News were flooded not with criticism, but with people sharing their own stories of unexpected moments when strangers became angels, when breakdowns became breakthroughs, when falling led to finding purpose. The broadcast, which was supposed to run 1 hour, extended to 2.5 hours as they took live calls from viewers across the country. A veteran called to thank them for showing that vulnerability wasn't weakness. It had inspired him to finally seek help for PTSD. A single mother shared how their authenticity tour had given her courage to leave an abusive relationship. A teenager revealed that watching their journey had prevented him from attempting suicide. But the moment that left everyone speechless came near the end of the broadcast. Kirk turned to Roumie and said, "You know, when I collapsed that day, I thought my career was over. I thought admitting weakness would destroy everything I'd built. Instead, it led me to the most meaningful work I've ever done, helping people understand that being human isn't something to hide from, it's something to celebrate." Roumie's response brought the entire studio to tears, and I thought I was just staying late in a TV studio because I couldn't shake a feeling. I had no idea God was positioning me to catch someone who was falling so that together we could help others learn how to fall gracefully and rise authentically. The final revelation came in the closing moments. Kirk announced that he and Roumie were launching something that had never existed before, a foundation dedicated to helping public figures, leaders, and everyday people find the courage to live authentically rather than performatively. They would provide resources, support groups, and safe spaces for people to shed their masks and discover who they were meant to be underneath all the expectations. As the camera stopped rolling, Kirk stood in the exact spot where he had collapsed a month earlier. But instead of the crushing chest pain and overwhelming anxiety he'd felt that day, he experienced something entirely different: profound gratitude. Gratitude for the collapse that had connected him to a friend. Gratitude for the weakness that had revealed his strength. Gratitude for the fall that had taught him how to truly stand. The studio erupted in applause, but this time it wasn't for a performance, it was for a transformation. Kirk's collapse had become a catalyst that gave millions of people permission to be authentically human in a world that demands perfection. What started as a medical emergency had evolved into a movement that was healing hearts, restoring relationships, and reminding people that our greatest moments of strength often emerge from our deepest moments of vulnerability. 1 week ago, Charlie Kirk collapsed on live TV and Jonathan Roumie rushed to his side. Today, they stand together as living proof that sometimes we have to fall apart before we can truly come together, not just as individuals, but as a society hungry for genuine connection in an increasingly artificial world.